She was only 25 years old. The slut, practically a child. Robert always had a wandering eye, but I put it down to his advancing age and the yearning for a more youthful life like we all do. I didn't expect him to act on it. With his secretary. How cliched. He's over twice her age. He could be her father, for fuck's sake. I'm trying not to think about it, though. Not since I started my new life. I spent the morning taking seeds and pine nuts out of the neighbor's bird feeder to eat later. I've got the hang of the thing now. The first few attempts had me spinning and flying through the air like a goddamn circus acrobat. Sure, I landed on all fours, and the fall was only about 6 feet, but my head stayed spinning for a while. At least I could fill my cheeks with food, and I can always go back for more. There was that one night when I noticed Robert was showering every time he came home from the office late. I don't know how I missed that sign. Until he'd started fucking that child, he'd always been a morning shower person. It's these little things that always seem so goddamn obvious in hindsight. I'd even asked him about it, and he'd had the audacity to wink and smile at me as he toweled himself off by the bed. "You like me clean, don't you?" he'd said. It made me confused at the time, but looking back, I want to take one of those towels, wrap it around his throat, and choke the life out of him. See if he'd wink and smile then. Bounding up the tallest telephone pole, I leap onto the power line that runs up and down the entire street. I remember the first time I dared to climb this high. I watched the others jumping onto the wire without a second thought, while I was fearing for my life. They didn't know any better, of course, but I knew very well of the danger. I was worried for nothing, though, because there's no direct possibility of being electrocuted unless somehow I was to become grounded while touching the wire. Outside of maybe getting cancer from the constant exposure to such an immense wattage of electricity, the convenience for safer travel won me over in the end. Winning me over was something Robert used to be good at. It's funny how much denial you can build up after almost 3 decades of unflinching trust. I suppose I only have myself to blame for being too comfortable, for not keeping my wits about me. How much lipstick does one have to find on a shirt collar, or catching the whiff of a perfume you never use, before you can finally break that wall of denial? Quite a lot, apparently. It was only because of the doorbell camera that the scales finally fell from my eyes, and my world came crashing down. Not at first, of course. The anger and self-righteous vengeance swallows all the other emotions, but for a while at least. Funny how the banality of checking to see if a package arrived can so quickly turn into the devastation of seeing your husband leaving the house with a strange woman. I jumped from the power line onto the old oak in Mrs. Brown's backyard. The thing was so big and so old its branches spread for 20 yards in all directions. Not many leaves left on it now. Fall was ending and winter was setting in. I noticed how much thicker my fur was these days, and the fat had built up around my waist. My belly was already bigger, of course. I could feel the kittens moving around inside me. Maybe only a couple more weeks before labor, I guessed. I don't like to think of them, and I really don't like remembering how they got in there. For all his ills, Robert had never coerced me into something like that. I can barely even remember him shouting in anger, let alone forcing himself on me. When I was still new to this reality, I was hungry and afraid. Desperation made me let my guard down, and it happened the first time that one of the larger males approached me, and I hadn't bolted away immediately to safety. It dropped a sunflower seed in front of me, and I ate it greedily. That is when it set itself on me. In my weakened state, I hadn't the energy to put up much of a struggle. Its large, well-nourished frame held me down. It screeched an almost human sound in my ears, and I felt its claws digging into my sides and back. I didn't realize what was happening at first. I thought maybe it was trying to kill me. But then I felt it inside me. It hurt a little, down there, and then I realized I was making the same kind of screeching noises. At least it was over quickly. I just lay there for a while, sore and still hungry. The damn thing came back again and dropped more sunflower seeds next to me. I took them begrudgingly and dragged myself away. 2 days later, I saw its squashed frame lying flat in the road. A car had got it. Good, I thought. After that, none of the males bothered me again. But then I noticed my stomach area getting a little bigger, and I could feel tiny things growing inside me. Robert never wanted kids, so I never had been a mother. Oh, the irony. His child of a girlfriend had gotten pregnant, apparently. I'd seen photos of her holding her belly when I checked on her Instagram page. The fucker. 20 years ago, I'd pleaded with him to start having children, but he refused. Said he didn't want to put any kids through what he went through growing up. His father had left his mother and sisters when he was young, and it had made him cold to the idea of a family. He was scared he would be the same. Well, I guess he will find out soon enough. I scurry up the side of an old rusty bike that's been laying next to Mrs. Brown's fence for as long as I can remember. I use it to get onto her fence, and I run along the top to get into her neighbor's garden. There are plenty of mushrooms growing under the bushes there. It was one of the few foods, other than the occasional nuts and seeds people put out for the birds, that I enjoyed in my new form as well as my old. I remember eating sautéed mushrooms with a steak while sipping a tall glass of Dom Pérignon the same night the sky had turned red and green. It was the day of my divorce being finalized, and I was celebrating alone. I think I was going to kill myself afterwards. I'm not sure. I do remember looking up at the sky from my back porch, the way the green waves of light danced with the red bursts of color. How beautiful, how strange. I was entranced. Then that fateful glance down, and I saw that little gray squirrel. It was sat on the porch railing, staring back at me. How I'd wished I could have been that squirrel. No divorce, no depression, not a care in the world. To be finally free. I longed to not have a care anymore. I really wanted to be that fucking squirrel. The sky got suddenly much brighter, and then everything went dark. I remember a pain in my head and an odd feeling of moving without my body. Well, the next thing I knew, I was staring up at my mother. Except it wasn't my mother. It was a woman who vaguely resembled her, a woman with a look of weariness and scorn. I was looking up at myself. A loud meow in the mid-distance makes me pause. I stop devouring the mushrooms and run back to and then up the fence. I knew who that meow belonged to. It was the ginger Tom that lives with the young black couple 2 doors down from my place. He's one of the neighborhood's 3 outdoor cats. None of them strays. All of them trouble. I'd never seen any of them kill a squirrel before, but they've gotten plenty of mice, birds, and rabbits. Nevertheless, I stay far away from them. Good timing, really. I needed to gather more dried grass and leaves for my nest. I'd found an empty hole at the top of the big oak tree, and I'd started filling it with anything suitable I could find. I had no clue how to build a nest, of course, but I figured things out as I went. See, Robert, I could have built the perfect nest for us. It was 2 days before the police came and took my old self away. I'd watched from the garden as a confused and hopelessly inferior mind attempted to steer my body around. It fell over, shit itself, and made all kinds of strange moans and groans as it shuffled around on the floor. I did try to help initially, but whenever I got anywhere near it, limbs flung wildly at me, and I feared I would get hurt. I was still in shock myself, coming to terms with my new reality. The only saving grace was that I seemed to retain my memories and capacity for human thought. I had to get used to being covered in fur and having a tail too, of course. My eyesight, smell, and hearing felt supernatural, but being itchy due to body mites wasn't pleasant, and I still long to be able to get a cream or shampoo to get rid of them. I just have to make do with furious scratching whenever the itches get too bad. I've had to get used to making pellets too, with no way to take away the stinging feeling I sometimes get afterward. There's no way to clean myself. Jesus, I really miss all the little luxuries and comforts that I'd taken for granted before. Good hygiene is impossible. I don't even have anywhere to wash my food. I've gotten used to it, though. My hunger and the constant fear of suddenly becoming something's next meal soon reshaped my expectations. There was one anniversary. I think it was our 10th. Some of my memories are beginning to fog up, and I'm losing the ability to recall specifics. Anyway, Robert took me to Barbados, where we ate fine food in a fancy beachside restaurant in the evening. The moon was full and bright, and the sound of waves gently crashing on the beach made it seem romantic. I'd worn my favorite blue dress, and later we danced on the beach with our shoes off. It started snowing, and the wind has a chill in it so severe I can't tolerate it. My body shivers and I can't feel my feet. I can't climb if I can't feel with my hands and feet properly. I put as much food as I could find into my hole in the oak tree. I had a hoard stashed under the stairs at the side of the big blue house across the road. I thought it was a good hiding place, but some of the other squirrels found the stash and left me barely a fraction of what I had originally stored there. Too late now. The air is sharp, and my ears and nose hurt. I hoped that the nesting material I'd found would be good enough, but the wind finds its way in, and I can't really seal the entrance. I pushed as many big leaves as I could up against the front of the nest, and I curl around my tail shivering. I realize now that this is how all outside creatures must go through winter, half starving, half freezing, and lucky if they don't end up as some predator's meal. I'm worried about my unborn kittens too. I have pains in my stomach when they move, but I have no access to painkillers. I just have to wince and bear it. There is no medicine for me, no midwives or doctors to help me if something goes wrong. I miss my old life, even without Robert in it. At least I wasn't hungry and cold and afraid all the time. I try curling up into a tighter ball and pull some of the nest material on top of my body, but my extremities are still numb and I can't stop shivering. I can't even cry with self-pity. I can only pray for sleep as the evening grows ever darker, ever colder. I am utterly alone.